Welcome to Zoom In Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I am Adil Brar. In the past week, US President Donald Trump has disrupted the international order through unprecedented tariffs, not only on China, but also on those commonly seen as US allies. The moves by the White House have raised concerns over the future of the international order. To discuss the uncertainty surrounding US trade and foreign policy, we are joined by Dr. Raja Mohan, a non resident distinguished fellow at the Asia Society Policy Institute and professor at National University of Singapore. Raja, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
President Trump has slapped hefty tariffs on pretty much the whole world, with China hit the hardest. Now there's a 90-day freeze on these tariffs. How are Asian countries responding to the new trade shock?
Look, I think the Asian countries have a special challenge. For many of them, China is an important economic partner, but most of the Asian countries have a major, large amounts of trade deficit with China. While these trade deficits are a problem, we also have a situation where most of Southeast Asia or Asia's exports go to the United States, just like China's. So the US is a major export market. So in that sense, the China is the destination of most imports, while the US is the destination of most exports. So I think that the both the relations are important for Asia. So navigating between the two at this point, I think, is going to be a great challenge because the US is also under Trump. Not only is he raised tariffs, but he's also wants to shut the back door for China's exports to the United States through Southeast Asia or other countries, so that he wants to reduce that as well. And that's why even uninhabited islands have been put on the list. So I think this is actually a major moment for Asia, because last 50 years, Asia has benefited from the US-China economic integration. Today, as US and China struggle to rearrange that relationship, there'll be a lot of pain for the region.
So, President Donald Trump's approach towards China seems to be focused on putting pressure on China through trade, which is quite different from former President Joe Biden's approach towards focusing on alliances. Do you think this is a long term shift in US approach towards its allies in Asia?
No, I think in terms of what Trump is saying, yes. I think it's important to understand, while the Democrats have traditionally, and the Biden administration has focused on alliances, there is a deep critique of alliances in the current administration. That it does not privilege alliances. It says actually alliances have been a burden on American military resources. And the fact that the allies have all enjoyed trade surpluses with the United States. So it's a double whammy as far as the Republican administration, this one is concerned, because they see not only that the US pays to protect its partners, but the partners also take advantage of the US market. So what they're demanding is a rearrangement of the relationship. One, the allies will have to spend more on their own defense, and two, they'll have to have a more balanced trade relationship with the United States. For the moment, at least, given the stakes that the region has in the trade with the US, many of them are in Washington now trying to negotiate an arrangement to salvage the market access while limiting the damage to the long-term security partnerships.
President Trump's tough talk on alliances has left many partners uneasy. Do you think this is a long term departure from the traditional commitment towards defense and security?
Look, I think it's not clear whether the US is pulling back. I think this administration, like all American administration, has multiple forces and factors operating. You have one bunch in the US establishment which is saying, look, let us withdraw from Middle East, let's withdraw from Europe and focus more on Asia. They argue China is the principal threat, therefore US must concentrate its military resources in Asia. But there's also another section which is saying, look, that it is, US should not be engaged in defending its allies. The US should focus on retrenchment, and that the allies should do more. So I think that argument is there. If the argument that the Washington has made in relation to Ukraine is extended to Taiwan, saying that, look, the US is not going to defend Taiwan, or that the regional countries must have to do it. So we are in a new situation. But let me enter the caveat here. The kind of net vector from these multiple arguments within the administration are yet to crystallize. So therefore, it will be a while before what exactly the broad direction of the administration in Asia comes out.
And how does India view this shift in US commitment to its partners?
I think India has actually recognized that the trade issue will be a big one between Delhi and Washington, and that's the reason why we saw India's external affairs minister travel to Washington just before the inauguration and join the inaugural activities of the Trump administration. And one of the reasons for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to arrive in Washington, he was the third leader to come there after the King of Jordan and the Japanese Prime Minister. So he was there in the middle of February, trying to engage Trump and to sort out the potential differences that on trade and other related issues. And in fact, Mr. Modi had committed himself to a trade deal to be negotiated before the fall, and all indications in Delhi are that the negotiations are in a intensive stage. So my own assessment, I could be wrong, is that India will be among the first few countries to actually finalize a trade deal with the United States in the coming weeks and months.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has just wrapped up a long trip to Southeast Asia. He requested that Vietnam should join hands to counter US tariffs. Do you think these Southeast Asian countries will go along with him?
So I would say for the Southeast Asian nations, they've received him very warmly and with great respect and deference in all the three countries. But I think all the three countries have big trade deficits. I mean, except Malaysia, which does not have too much trade deficit, but Vietnam has a big trade deficit. So does Cambodia. And I think one of the interesting things, according to Xinhua, that President Xi has promised to open its market. Now, if that turns out to be true, I think it will be a big step that the Southeast Asians can actually export more to China. But I think it's something that remains to be seen because really what we have is a Chinese manufacturing machine, which is so powerful, which has grown. Today, China is world's 35% of the world's manufacturing takes place in China. Therefore, whether China will move from a manufacture export model to a consumption model, that is a big internal question in China. At this point, there's no definitive evidence that China's economic model is shifting to focus less on exports and more on consumption. But if it does that, I'm sure Asian countries will welcome it. But at this point, the jury is still out.
So there's a lot of buzz around Vietnam and India possibly benefiting from US President Donald Trump's tariffs as Apple has shifted some of their supply chains from China to Vietnam and India. Is that really the case?
Look, I think you have to be careful with this proposition. These things take a long time. I mean, I think it's almost 4 or 5 years since Apple has shifted some iPhone production to India, but the majority still remains in China. So while there is an opportunity for countries like Vietnam and India to do more manufacturing, taking advantage of the situation, there are differences between these two countries as well. Vietnam is far more open to foreign capital and ease of business, while India has some distance to go. Therefore, I think in India, unlike Vietnam or which are run by communist parties, simply can't open up and say, "Look, here is our labor force. Do what you want, and let's have more production." So I think that problem India will always have. I mean, not even talking about India's politics, which surround policy making.
India is reportedly in talks with the US to sign a trade deal with the US. Could India really offer a model to the Southeast Asian countries to address the concerns that Trump has raised?
No, I don't think we should presume that India is going to offer a model that, look, everyone is negotiating. I mean, it's not just India. UK is there. I mean, started quite early. Then you have all the Asian countries: Japan, South Korea, India, Vietnam. So these are among the top trade partners of the US, and I think all of them are negotiating. And I think each economy brings its own specificity. And Trump is also going to examine the non-trade, non-tariff barriers in all these countries. So I think there'll be a lot of variation in these trade deals. But what matters, I think, for the US at this point is while to overarching the specifics of each country is the question of reducing trade deficit as well as the reducing the non-tariff barriers. For India, I think it will be harder in some areas, like in the farm sector, So other countries might be slightly different. So I would say India. I don't think we should presume India is some kind of a model. Everyone has huge high stakes in this economic relationship with the US, and they're all finding ways to address the challenge.
So, you recently wrote that President Trump has torn the old map of globalization. Is this a turning point for the global economy?
No, it is absolutely a turning point. I mean, I think for nearly 40 odd years, the idea that you could have a global markets and global production with less reference to the domestic politics of countries, that illusion, I think, has now been shattered. So there is actually openly, I think Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent has repeatedly said now time has come to both the revise or reform the Bretton Woods model, which goes back to the Second World War, as well as the WTO model, which kind of simply opened up all barriers against the movement of people and goods and services and capital. So I think both these, the framework that was created for global trade in 1945, as well as the WTO arrangements that have come, both these are under stress. And I think we're going to see initially, at least, a negotiation of these bilateral agreements, and whether they lead to a new order remains to be seen. But I think there's no question that the assumptions that we made about globalization are fundamentally today unsustainable.
So, Dr. Raja Mohan, what will the world order look like going forward?
I think one of the important things to remember to understand what is going on today is the fact that, look, we often frame it as US versus China or one country versus another country. In many ways, I think the trade wars are also class wars within the countries. That in the US, a lot of people say, look, the US is doing fine. It has massive service exports to China, so why is it bothered? But no, but Washington can't tell the American working people that, look, Wall Street is doing fine. You might have lost your jobs to Mexico and China. So this notion it's a purely negotiation between nations is wrong, because within the US and within many parts of the West, that the question that globalization has cost the working people, that's a real serious argument at one level. A second level is that the free movement of labor across the borders, that too is a toxic issue. I think we've seen that in the US domestic politics now against immigration, the need to crack down on immigration. And finally, there is also the question of what is happening within China. We might not see those debates publicly. The idea that China can forever starve its people of consumption and simply drive its exports, I think that too is a political question. Therefore, whether that argument will come to the fore in a public way in China, we will see. But I think what's happened is the need to rebalance the world between countries like Germany and China, which are persistent surpluses with other countries, while the countries like the United States, which are really consumers of exports from these manufacturing surplus countries, that balance has to be redone. That I don't think it's going to be China can forever export to other countries, and US will forever import from other countries. And I think it is that rebalance involves, I think, rearranging domestic political equations, the relationship between capital and labor within each of these countries. So I think those are going to actually be far more consequential than merely what happens on the tariff issue.
With that, thank you for joining the show today and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. For more stories from Taiwan Plus News, follow us on social media. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for Taiwan Plus.
Taiwan Plus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.